Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 6, the actuality, gathering useful sound bites. In order to gather sound bites, in order to gather video or audio material from an immediate source, we would need to learn about interviewing. And for interviewing, we do have a PowerPoint slideshow that you can watch on your own, read on your own. It's just a bunch of slides. But there are some principles which overlap with the principles mentioned in the book. These are pieces of advice for journalists who want to interview people successfully. First of all, let's just round up, let's summarize a little bit of information on what kinds of interviews we do and what kinds of interviewees we can have. The types of interviews can be, obviously video or audio, obviously with a camera or with an audio recorder, and obviously we can be face-to-face or at a distance speaking over the phone. And nowadays, a lot of stations are using webcams because of social distancing and convenience. If people are in two different states, for example, they can still communicate via video chat. And so those lines are a little blurry right now with all technology being used to bring people together and create an impression of immediacy. But traditionally, we had chances to talk to people face to face, or we would have to call them up and speak with them over the phone. You can also interview sources over email in writing form, in written form, and that is a legitimate way of interviewing because that way you're not only gathering information, but you're also gathering it verbatim. You don't have to transcribe. If a person writes something to you, you can take that sentence or phrase or paragraph and put it in your story verbatim because that's what the person says. It's not such an effective way of bringing another person's voice into a broadcast story because that will be your voice reading their statement. And so naturally, we tend to get the person to say those things on their own. So kinds of interviews, types of interviews, depending on the distance and depending on the medium, the technology, how we gather the sound or the video or the words, the text. These are the technical aspects of the classification. In terms of individuals, in terms of the kinds of sources you may have, we have official sources. Those are lawmakers, those are newsmakers. We have, people in official positions, in official capacity, police, fire department, hospital officials. Usually a person speaking on behalf of an organization or a company or a business would be called a spokesperson. Regardless of their official title, you can refer to them as spokespeople because that's what they do for you, for your story. It doesn't matter if their title is some fancy bunch of words. We don't need that. What our audience needs to know is that the person speaks on behalf of their group, their business or organization or government entity. So we have official sources, we have experts, expert sources, like if you're talking about a political development in the Middle East, you can get someone in Oneonta from the Department of Political Science or History or International Studies and get their expertise no matter where they are located. They can be here and the issue can be elsewhere, but the expert can shed light using their knowledge, and that's why being on a college campus or connected to a college campus is really a big benefit for all of us. Then there are people who are affected by some law or by some event. If there is a fire, we have the residents of the area, the residents of the building. If there is a new development, we have the neighbors. If there is a murder, God forbid, again, we have witnesses, neighbors, churchgoers, school friends, and teachers. So we have all these people who are directly affected, and they will be eyewitnesses or people who are feeling the impact of your story. And finally, those are real people, and there are some real people who are not directly affected by anything like a fire or a shooting, thankfully, but they can be seen as real people who are relevant to your story because they just live here in this community. And if you're talking about some new law affecting Oneonta, allowing people to raise chickens in their yards, anyone living in Oneonta who has a stake in that matter, who has a yard and may have some thoughts about raising chicken, that person is a real person with a relevant perspective. If the person does not have a point of view or anything to say, it's unfair to bring that person into your story because it's just a waste of your energy. The and it raises a question of intentionality. Are we intentionally going after people who are partisan, who are interested, who have something to achieve or to gain? Well, that's the ethics of it, and you can answer that question by being honest, by being far reaching and inclusive, and getting everyone who's relevant or who can bring information to your story, getting their voices together. So, we talked about types of interviewees from official, expert, um, real people, and then we do have a Vox Pop format, which is a technical term. It means the voice of the population, the voice of the people. A Vox Pop is a gathering of voices. For example, in radio, you will have different people speaking about the same topic, on the same topic, answering the same question. Sometimes the question will be asked before, and then you would have, let's say, 10 different answers from different people with recognizably different voices. It's unfair to have the voices, getting confused with one another. You need to separate them by their pitch, by their, sometimes, yes, voices are gendered, believe it or not. In this day and age, we still tell which voice has a low pitch and high pitch. And so by putting them together in a contrasting fashion, you can tell one person from another without giving their names and titles, because their names and titles would be irrelevant to the story. Let's say, residents of Oneonta, what do they think about the Christmas tree and Santa Claus in the circumstance of COVID? Is that a risk, or do we need Santa Claus? Do we need to put kids in Santa's lap? And residents can have different kinds of perspectives. And here you would think that a person who has children would be more um, interested, more passionate about something like that. People who don't have kids, they may not have anything to say, but it's also fair to ask them. And so you have a Vox Pop where you edit those voices together without titles and names, and just give it as a sampler of different voices, different flavors, different opinions from this particular community. Let's say movie theater, moviegoers, ask 10 people what they thought about the movie they just saw. Stand outside of the movie theater and interview them. All different kinds of voices bunched together. That's called a Vox Pop. In television, of course, identification happens with the faces. You can see who's the speaker. You can tell, if it's, um, you can tell color, you can tell almost always age, etc., etc. All those physical attributes are visible to a degree that the person wants to demonstrate. But again, without names and titles, these are just residents, these are just citizens who speak their mind, and you often see those kinds of interviews. Sometimes on television, they would add a name just to be fair, and also in newspapers, if you put those kinds of interviews, Vox Pops, on a newspaper page, sometimes at the bottom with a ribbon, in a ribbon with photographs, yeah, names would be relevant, but not the positions, because it's just a sampler of the population. So the voice of the population. So, how to conduct a good interview? I would refer you to the PowerPoints because there are a few rules, and here as well in the textbook we have rules. First of all, when you meet with the person, tell them how long you want them to spend with you. Be honest, be a little more generous, and if you're done early, then you're fine. If you were to extend your time, that would interfere with their schedules, obviously. And the kinds of interviews for their purpose are also divided into broadcast interviews, an interview that turns into a question and answer on the radio or on television, and those would be talk shows, those would be interview shows, just like Charlie Rose. Now, of course, he's gone, but he used to be a good interviewer. I'm not erasing whatever scandal was he in. I'm just saying that that's a name of a person who did interviews on television on daily basis. Um, Many other interviewers, Terry Gross on National Public Radio, a program called Fresh Air, and many, many others, they do question and answers. In magazines, there are question and answers of celebrities. In Rolling Stone, for example, there would be question and answers with famous actors and musicians, artists. But in most cases, you and I will be conducting interviews to pull sound bites. We don't need the whole interview because the whole interview is very often unkempt. It is so imperfect that we only need the good parts, the rest we can tell on our own. And very, very often, those interviews are only one fragment of our larger coverage. That person whom you interview is only one voice, whereas you need three or four others to come in and help you tell a story from different perspectives so that there is a narrative with illustrations, bridges built from other people's voices, sound bites, actualities. And so I will be sharing a lot of uh, examples with you, which I invite you to listen to, not read, but listen. And so that's how we use actualities and sound bites. So in order to choose good actualities, you need to generate good actualities. Ask a question in an informed, brief way. Make your questions shorter than the answer. Don't appreciate your own voice, although it's always a smart strategy to record yourself in a manner that allows you to use your own voice as well. So in other words, if you have a microphone, keep it close to you and the source, and later you can choose to use your own question as well. But ask the right questions in order to get good answers. Ask why and how, and can you elaborate on that, and what's it like? Um, and ask tough questions. Do not ask yes or no questions because that's all you're going to get as an answer. And I will show you a story about interviewing well. And then later on in the chapter, you will read a little more about how to choose the sound bites and how to write them out. That is part of the mechanics of a soundbite. For now, I think we will just stop at the interviewing skills, and we will focus on learning how to become good interviewers. Just as a few parting notes, parting words, I would say that establish good rapport and do not be gratuitous, but do not be confrontational either. Your job is to show the person that you are interested, and moreover, you represent an audience who is interested in hearing their views. So be ready, be careful, pay attention, listen carefully, and build your questions not just from the list. That I would insist that you prepare a list of questions, at least 7 if you're going to do a normal interview. If you're going to do a very quick interview, 3 questions. Be a careful listener, respect the person, respect their time, and also observe the environment and the tone in which things are said. Sometimes a person can say things in a manner that is unique to them, and you should notice those parts and use them as actualities. So we'll talk more about interviewing later. But for now, thank you for listening, and please refer to the PowerPoints on interviewing skills. Thank you.